Matthew 8, verses 1 to 4. Jesus cleanses the leper. Our number that we're featuring in the Greek word is number 3015, leper. 3014 is lepros, very similar, lepra. And the personal pronoun is the Greek grammatical structure that we are going to be studying in this section. It begins in verse 1. Katavanti they avto apo tu orus, ikoluthison avto okli poli. They is the postpositive. It could be but in his coming down or when in his coming down. Avto refers to Jesus. Doesn't have his name, but it would say otherwise. It says when Jesus, in Jesus coming down, but it doesn't. It has the personal pronoun in the third person, singular. From where? The mountain where he was talking to the people, giving out what's called the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount. And it says a great multitude followed him. Now, it doesn't necessarily say as they're following him down from the mountain. He may have went down from the mountain and then they came and they followed him. But in other chapters, we see that it was close to Capernaum. And so great crowds means when he came down, he was fairly close to a lot of people. Now the mountain, from the mountain, which mountain did he come down from? Well, there's four possibilities I see. Number one is Mount Hermon. And Mount Hermon, and here's the Sea of Galilee. Capernaum is here where he was at, coming down from the mountain. And then Mount Hermon is up here. It's in actually Syria. Here are the coordinates of it, 9,232 feet in height. And then Anti-Lebanon mountain range, and the summit straddles the border between Syria and Lebanon in the Golan Heights in Syria. And the distance from Hermon to Capernaum is about 40 miles. So that's another possibility. Mount Carmel, over here on the coast. The coordinates are given over here. It's only 1,724 feet high, and it's 40 miles across to Capernaum. And then we have Mount Tabor, which is down here, south, and Capernaum's up here. So it's fairly close, a little closer. Here are the coordinates. It's only 1,886 feet high. Then, and it's 15 miles from Capernaum. And then we have Mount Meron, and here are the coordinates of Mount Meron, 3,950 feet high. It's 10 miles from Capernaum. And you would think that everybody would see that this is the mountain that Jesus went up to the Transfiguration, all the places it talks about the high mountain, because it's the highest mountain in Eretz Israel. Why it doesn't even appear on maps. It does appear in the news recently because there was a Hasidic gathering there, and hundreds of them were stampeded and killed. And they made a big thing out of it. But what's interesting about this mountain is I believe it's mentioned in the book of Ezekiel, the last 9 chapters. And you can go into my videos on the last 9 chapters of Ezekiel, and you can see where Mount Meron, the mountain that the temple is on, the water comes out of the mountain, out of the temple, and it flows to the Lake of Galilee. Well, there's no other mountain that's high except Mount Meron, and it flows down into the Lake of Galilee. So this is where Jesus was and where he came down. Here are the coordinates of it here, and it's only 10 miles to Capernaum. It's the closest of all of the mountains. But also we have a site on the internet. I showed you the linkage, Mount Meron to the Sea of Galilee. And it goes all the way through and explains to these people up on Mount Meron how they go to the Sea of Galilee, probably exactly the way Jesus went back and forth. And it goes into detail here. You can go and read all about this little trek, and we get down to, gets closer to the Sea of Galilee, and they finally make it there. And you can probably, I think you can see the Sea of Galilee from Mount Meron. I'm not sure on that, but now they finally made it to the Sea of Galilee. Now, as far as that mountain, it says in Matthew 14:24, and having dismissed the multitudes, he ascended into the mountain in private to pray. Now, all these people, it wouldn't have been any other mountain, and the boat was already in the midst of the sea being tormented by the waves, and he doesn't say he can see it, but I'm sure he could. In Matthew 15:29, it says, and having crossed over from there, Jesus came by the Sea of Galilee, and having ascended into the mountain, he was sitting there. And then in Matthew 17:1, it says, and after 6 days, Jesus takes with himself Peter and James and John his brother, and bears them unto a high mountain in private. And that was the mount where he transformed into bright light and another form. And God said, this is my son, the beloved, to the disciples that were with him, Peter, James, and John. And then it says in Luke 9:37, and it came to pass on the next day of their going down from the mountain, there met him with him a great multitude. So the next day, so they went down fairly quickly, and they were by Capernaum, because all these people, a great multitude, met him. Couldn't have been any other mountain. It wouldn't have been Hermon, 9,000 feet up. Would have taken weeks. And it's higher than the other one. So Mark 3:7-13, it says, and Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and he ascended into the mountain. And then Mark 6:45, it says, and immediately he compelled his disciples to step into the boat and to lead to the other side to Bethsaida, until he should dismiss the multitude. And having dismissed them, he went forth into the mountain to pray. So here he's now coming down, and then it continues, Ke idu, and behold, lepros selthon prosakini afto, a leper having come did obeisance to him. A leper is a person who has leprosy, a condition that affects the skin quite a bit, other things. A leper, if you go into this book done by Alfred Edersheim, and it's called The Life and Times of Jesus, the Messiah. And it's one of the best books I've ever read. I read it years ago. It goes into detail about the time of Jesus, the Gospels, and this man was a Jew who converted to Christianity and wrote this book with the knowledge of all the rabbinic teachings and everything that is fantastic to read. And in it, it talks about the leper at the time of Jesus, that the leper was not to have any contact with a living person, he was to avoid a living person. They were to appear as one's mourning the dead, not a happy person. Their clothes were to be torn. The hair was to be disheveled, all undone. And the lower part of the face and the upper lip were covered, so he could talk. And he was to proclaim out loud, unclean, unclean. So here is this man coming, and he's falling down in front of Jesus. That's what proskenesi is, to do obeisance, falling down to him. That would be again to Jesus, even though it doesn't mention his name here. And he was saying, Legon, Kyrie, Lord, eantheles, if you should want, vina se me katharise, you are able to cleanse me. And the me would be the leper. And so he says, oh, you can cleanse me if you want. Earlier we see with lepers in Luke 4:27, where Jesus says there were many lepers in the time of Elisha, the prophet in Israel, and not one of them was cleansed except Naaman the Syrian, who came to Elisha because of the servant woman to Naaman, the general, and Elisha told him to go to the Jordan and immerse in it 7 times. And he was offended. Why, I could have done that in any river up in Syria. So he was ready to go back in a huff. And his servant says, well, if he told you to climb a real high mountain, you would have done it. But he just said to do this. So Naaman changed his attitude, went down, dipped 7 times, and was cleansed. I think the only other place that the leper was cleansed that I can think of. And then in Luke 17:12 it says, and of his, Jesus, entering into a certain town, there met with him 10 leprous men which stood at a distance. So Jesus has other times he has dealt with the people with leprosy. Even in Matthew 26:6 it says, and Jesus being in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper. So another person that he must have cleansed. Now, Edersheim brings out how a person that touches a person that has leprosy becomes unclean. Jesus never sinned as far as the law. So what did he do? He heals them. Instead of when he touches them, it says he's touched them. He heals them and they no longer have leprosy. They're cleansed. So Jesus is not unclean then. It's a very interesting concept. And reading Edersheim really brings that out. So the leper saying, oh Lord, if you should want, you are able to cleanse me. He's making a bold statement there about somebody he knows nothing about, except for what he has heard, and he comes for help. Just as we have never met Jesus, but yet we come to help so many times. I pray to the Lord from I'm sick or I'm having a problem, or just to thank him for being who he is, for dying on the cross, for giving things to me, all sorts of things. I'm always talking to the Lord Jesus, and I'm sure many of you are also coming to the Lord and doing obeisance to him on our knees and face is what this man did. And he has confidence that Jesus is going to heal him. In verse 3, it continues, Ke ektinos tin hira, and stretching out the hand, ipsato avtu o Isus. Jesus touched him. Avtu, referring to the leper. And here we have third person singular. So Jesus touched him, which he either becomes unclean or he makes the unclean person clean, saying, Fellow, I want, katharistite, be cleansed. In the imperative, be cleansed. Ke theos ekatharisti avtu e lepra. And immediately he was cleansed of his, the leper's, leprosy. In verse 4, Ke legi avto, the leper, Jesus says to the leper, to him. See, otherwise it would say, and Jesus says to the leper, but it says to him. Ora midani epis. See that you tell no one. Al ipage siavton, but go. Siavton dixon to eri. Show to yourself to the priest. Ke prosineca to thoron o prosetaxe moisis is martyrion aftis. Show to yourself to the priest. There it is. And then aftis. And offer the gift offering Moses assigned for a testimony. Now it's interesting as it uses a plural here, to them. Well, to the priests, but it doesn't say to the priests plural up here because one priest does the cleansing act, which we will go into here. And that is the law regarding the leper. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, This is the law of the leper, and whatever day he should have been cleansed, and shall be brought to the priest, which Jesus told him to do. And the priest shall come forth outside the camp. And the priest shall look, and behold, if the infection has been healed of the leprosy from the leper, then the priest shall assign, and they shall take for the one being cleansed 2 clean, living small birds, and wood of cedar, and twine scarlet, and hyssop. And the priest shall assign, and they shall slay the small one bird into an earthenware receptacle over living water. And it goes on and on to the end of that, pretty much to the end of this chapter. You can read all about the law of the leper. Now, an interesting thing, it says, See that you tell no one, but go to show to the priest and offer. Now, he's told this to other people when he's healed them, to not to tell anybody, but some of them go out and blab, tell other people. Now, what would have happened here if he would have told other people and they would have went to the priest in Jerusalem? Then he would have been expecting him, and things may have went the other way. He may not have wanted to see him. It's hard to say. I'm just making a conjecture. But when Jesus tells somebody to do something, then do it. But I was sitting next to a man after a Bible study, and the part in the Bible study was Jesus told somebody not to do it, but they went out and told everybody. And this man next to me was saying, well, that's just really great that they had gone out and telling everybody about Jesus. I said, no, it's not. If Jesus says not to do it, that's the number one thing. You don't do it. And he has a reason for what he's doing. And if you contradict his order, then that's not good. Our next section is very interesting. The believing centurion. Don't want to miss this one. It's amazing what is going to be shown, I think, to you. So I hope you join us in the next section. I can't wait to do it, as you can probably tell.